hope there is going to be some kind of an interaction after this. I would like to have it that way because I'm never comfortable with the Mann Ki Baat format. In the last 10 years, there has been a large-scale economic destruction. I would flag a few issues in the limited time that I have. The reason for this is that the present government and the present dispensation, they do not give any importance or value to equality.
Let's speak up to 20 minutes.
Recently there is a World Inequality Lab report. Most of you must have seen it. It said that 1% of our population corners 22% of our income. And 1% of our population owns more than 40% of the assets. There is a very serious inequality in this country. But what does the regime or the dispensation think about this inequality? There are three reactions to this report. One, immediately after this report had come out, a very eminent economist who is part of the present dispensation, who was the founding vice chairman of our Niti Aayog and presently chairman of the Finance Commission, Professor Arvind Pangaria, wrote a very influential article. The title of the article is "Don't Lose Sleep Over Inequality." So this is one. There are some people who said there is no inequality. And there is another person who is a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, who said that in India, especially among its youth, there is a poverty of aspiration. And he also questioned, very important questions he raised. Why is it in India youth do not aspire to be Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos? They want to be intellectuals, they have discussions, they want to be like Mrinal Sen or people like that. Such a bad thing. That's what he said. These are the broadly three reactions to the economic inequality that we witness today. If somebody were to ask me, what is the economic philosophy of this present government? I would say the following. Give 5 kilos of ration to poor people and give 5 airports to friends. This is the essential economic philosophy of this dispensation. We talked about the economic inequality. Some time ago, I think it was in February, the government has released a white paper of the economy. Somebody asked me what I thought about the white paper on economy. I said, I did not have to wait for a white paper on the economy from the government. I buy vegetables every week. I buy my groceries every month. So I get a white paper every week and I get a white paper every month. I'm not here to compare what the situation was under Jawaharlal Nehru and what the situation is under who. That's not my brief. I will try to give you my own lived experience. What I experience when I go and buy my vegetables and when I go and buy my groceries. And the comparison is between just about 4 or 5 months ago and the first week of this month. I bought dal for 110 rupees about 5 months ago. And this month, first week, I paid 170. Jaggery I bought for 42 rupees about 5 months ago. And this month, first week, I bought it for 53 rupees. Sugar I bought for 34 rupees about 5 months ago. And first week of this month, I bought it for 45 rupees. Ginger I bought for 95 rupees 5 months ago. And this month, first week, I bought it for 125 rupees. Green chilies, we use a lot of them. I bought for 65 rupees 5 months ago. Now it is 83 rupees. This is the white paper. I get this every week and every month. The reason why I rely on this white paper rather than on the government's data is that the government's data is suspect. Very rarely you get any authentic data from the government. And whatever data that we get from the government, I have a feeling it is manipulated. For instance, why do I say this? I say this because earlier, 1 kilometer of a 4-lane road used to be 1 kilometer of a 4-lane road. Now, 1 kilometer of a 4-lane road is 4 kilometers. So therefore, there is a 4-fold increase in everything. So that you can say India is the fastest growing economy. India is the 5th largest economy. I studied a bit of economics. What puzzles me is we have become 5th largest economy by overtaking the United Kingdom. And I am sure everyone in this hall is in agreement that the United Kingdom is a developed country. we overtake a developed country and become the fifth largest economy, are we not a developed country? But the Prime Minister says he would make India a developed country in 2047. That is the promise. So there is a huge manipulation of data. Today in India, the household saving is at a historic low of 5%. The household debt is at a historic high of 40%. Yet, we are told we are the fastest growing economy in the country. And the World Hunger Index said that we are very low in hunger index. One of the ministers, a prominent minister, I don't want to name the minister, that minister found fault with the World Hunger Index. And that minister gave an explanation of why World Hunger Index has doubtful methodology. That minister told in a public gathering that that minister left home on a particular day at 4 o'clock in the morning, went to the airport, went to Bangalore, attended a meeting like this, finished the meeting, rushed back to the airport, took another flight, went to Mumbai, participated in a meeting like this, finished the meeting, rushed again to the airport, took another flight, went to Jaipur, delivered another lecture, rushing back to the airport to catch flight, to go back to Delhi late. Then the phone rang. Somebody on the other side of the line asked, "Are you hungry?" And the minister was hungry. So the minister said, "Yes, I am hungry." And this World Hunger Index people said, "India is hungry." That is the explanation that Government of India's prominent cabinet minister gives about hunger index. Hunger index is not calculated that way. Sri Shetty knows and Akar knows and all of us know that. But trivialization of a problem, trivialization of misery, not only trivialization, but making it as a joke. That is the main perspective about inequality and hunger of this government. But in just about a couple of days after that, the Prime Minister decided to give 5 kilos of ration to 82 crore people. Now the question is, when there is no hunger in the country, when everybody is very well fed, why is this government and the Prime Minister giving free ration of 5 kilos of food grains to 82 crore people. So that is the reality. And this government and its leadership is proudly saying that we are giving free ration to 82 crore people. Why do you need to give free ration to 82 crore people? If they have jobs, if they have incomes, if their agriculture is doing well, if their small businesses are doing well, why do you need to give? The government doesn't talk about that. And on an average, about 1.5 lakh people are every year, year after year, regularly, without fail, without break, are leaving India. Not for studies, not for tourism, not for jobs, but they are relinquishing the passports and giving up the citizenship and going away. And most of them are high net worth individuals. Notwithstanding what the industrialists and investors talk in public forums in front of the Prime Minister, somebody gets up and says, the Prime Minister is such a great man, a very important industrialist in this country. But what is the domestic investment? It has fallen from around 30% to 19% in the last 10 years. Domestic investment today is at its lowest because people are not willing to invest. Because people have no confidence in the economic prospects of this country. This is very important because it is not what people say, it is what people do, especially in terms of investment, that is more important today. This is the situation. People are not investing. But you have to give credit to this government on certain things. The government is doing its best to encourage investment. It has reduced corporate taxes from 30% to 22%. It has written off corporate debt to the tune of about 26 lakh crore. It has also adopted a policy of crowding in investment by flushing the economy with a lot of public investment, expecting the private investment to come in. It has done that also. It has also introduced a scheme called PLI, Production Linked Incentives. What more do you want? Even then people are not investing. It is not because the government is not doing enough. The government is doing enough. After all this, there are so many conferences that the government is organizing and pleading with the investors, please invest. Even then they are not investing, is it? It is not for the lack of efforts by the government. Government is doing its best. What more do you expect? You are writing off debt. You are reducing the corporate tax. You are giving PLI. You are also appealing to people. You are saying, Namaste, please come. You are saying, make in India and all that, but still, it's not coming in. This is a very, very serious issue. So, investment is a problem. Hunger is a problem. Inequality is a problem. Crony capitalism is a problem. You see, the government has also gone to the extent of deploying the entire civil aviation ministry to a small town facilitated people coming from abroad, special flights and all that, not just the Civil Aviation Ministry, but recently I've read somewhere that even the Indian Air Force also was deployed. And this will take me back to a remark that Professor Pangaria had made in his Lose Sleep Over Inequality. He said, you see, rich people are good people, both of them. If they earn money, what will they do? They invest. And if not today, tomorrow, if not tomorrow, after 10 months, if not tomorrow, if not after 10 months, after 10 years, you will also get something. So let them earn. They are called wealth creators. So encourage them. But you have to be tolerant to some little bit excesses. You know, they do these kind of excesses. Celebrate pre-wedding in a big way. Spend a couple of thousands of crores. You have to ignore these things in the interest of wealth creation and employment generation. But the point is, Professor Pangaria misses this important point that in spite of encouragement to the wealth creators, to both of them, jobs are not increasing. Incomes are falling. Investment is falling. You know, India has one of the highest youth unemployment rate in the world. It's 24%. One of the highest, and India is in the company of countries like Iran, Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, countries like that. Our small neighbor, Bangladesh, has only 12% of youth unemployment. This is the headline youth unemployment. But if you see the details, people who are between 20 years and 25 years, unemployment rate among them is 40%. And the recent ILO report said about employment and unemployment that of the total number of unemployed people, over 60% are qualified, educated, unemployed. And the chief economic advisor, who was there on that occasion of the release of that report, Sri Anand Nageshwara, he said, solving unemployment problem is not the concern of the government. You know, we have, in the 60s and 70s, most of the cinemas used to be made in Telugu, Tamil, Kannada together. I don't know how many of you are aware of that. There was a movie called Tughlaq, Muhammad bin Tughlaq or some movie. It's not a historical movie. It's a modern adaptation. And in that, the leader was called Tughlaq because he was taking a lot of decisions which were similar to what the king had taken. And Anand Nageshwaran, interestingly, in that meeting, also refers to that movie. It was written by Joe Laxman, and likens those people who promise to solve the unemployment problem to Tughlaq. I don't know what he meant. Because in 2014 we had a huge promise by the current Prime Minister that he will create 2 crore jobs and solve unemployment problem. So Anand Nageshwaran said it is like Tughlaq. This is the economic discourse. These are the economic facts. Of course, there's so many things more. Probably when we have time in the Q&A and in discussion, we can go into the details. I will stop here with the following caution. And if I don't say these few lines in conclusion, I will not leave Bangalore with satisfaction. Why did I come here? I could have just written it somewhere and you would have read. But the reason why I thought when Kripaji had asked me to come here, and the organizers have asked me to come here, is to share my apprehension. My apprehension. This is the apprehension of so many people. I share that apprehension very clearly, is this, that if we are not careful in this election, we probably will not have another free and fair election in this country. And if we are not careful in this election, what is happening in Manipur can happen every state in the country. Please don't be complacent. Because you see, Northeast is not somehow a major part of our political imagination. It is happening somewhere, it won't happen to us. No, what is happening in Manipur can happen in Karnataka, in Andhra Pradesh, in Telangana, in Maharashtra, in Madhya Pradesh, everywhere. And it is more likely to happen than not. Please keep this in mind. And the economic misery will only increase. There's a large-scale destruction of our economy, both the polity, both equality and other things. My friends have already spoken. Sir is asking me to say a few words about the electoral bonds. Many things have already been said about electoral bonds. I will only raise a few questions about electoral bonds and then conclude. I describe electoral bonds as not only the biggest scam in India, but it is the biggest scam in the world. Not on the basis of how much money has changed hands, but what is the quantum of money that is behind what has changed hands? What kind of a huge thousands of crores of contracts have been awarded for a few hundreds of crores of electoral bonds? What is the quantum of money, a black money that was prevented from being unearthed because some money was paid in electoral bonds? What is the amount of money laundering that has taken place because companies which don't have profits, which are in losses, have paid huge amounts of electoral bonds. Now, electoral bonds is like a currency note. It doesn't have the name. When you buy it, it's registered in your name, but it's not necessary that you buy it from your money. You buy it and give it to me, I give it to the government or the ruling party. So, whose name you see need not be the person or the company that really paid the bond. And so many other things. The point is this, that recently in a wonderfully a grueling kind of a interview by ANI and Tanti TV. They grilled the Prime Minister, both of them. In that interview, the Prime Minister had said that those people who are opposed to the electoral bonds will soon come to regret it. I was trying to understand what he meant by that. Is it that, Akar and Sri Shetty, they say, oh my God, we missed this point. It is such a nice scheme, we didn't realize. And they will regret it. Is that what he meant? Or is something going to happen if he is given a chance again? There's one more related question, set of questions that I have. Who are the people who will come to regret it? Does that include Supreme Court of India? Because it's the Supreme Court which has said it is unconstitutional. Not Akar Patel, not Parkal Prabhakar, not Mr. Shetty. It is the Supreme Court. Does that include the judges who sat on that bench? Do they also come to regret it? Does that include the Chief Justice of India who will regret it? Because he is the one who presided over the bench which said the electoral bonds are unconstitutional. Who are these people who are going to regret it? Why will they regret it? This is something which all of us will have to think about before casting our vote in these elections.